good morning to you once again. I hope you enjoyed your weekends. Good. This morning we shall look at short-run laws of returns. But before that, when we met the last time, we discussed demand and supply, and then how to calculate for demand and how to calculate for supply, and then their elasticities. But this morning, we are going to continue with returns to factor. Returns to factor. When we talk about short-run laws of returns to factor, it simply refers to how a producer will convert input into output. It means the producer is going to use some input resources to produce goods and services. But before that, we have four types of returns to factor. Four types of returns to factor. Diminishing returns to factor. And then the last one is negative returns to factor. So as I said, we have four main types of returns to factor. Increasing returns to factor, constant returns to factor, diminishing returns to factor, and then negative returns to factor. We have two main methods in using to analyze or explain these returns to factor. These two methods are, so let me put it on the board for you. We have two methods of explaining the returns to factor. These two methods are: one, the use of diminishing returns to factor, and then two, isoquant method. So as I said, we have two main methods in using analyzing the returns to factor. We have diminishing returns to factor and then isoquant method. But today we shall look at the law of diminishing marginal returns to factor. So let's look at the law of diminishing marginal returns to factor. Diminishing marginal returns to factor. This is a theory and a concept. So as I said, before a producer will produce, the producer must combine some quantities of the variable inputs with the fixed inputs. I said fixed input are all those inputs that do not change, and the variable input are input that varies alongside production. So before a producer or a firm will produce, the firm or the producer must combine these two inputs to produce the commodity. So under the law of diminishing marginal returns, we are going to assume that the fixed input is land. So the fixed input is land, and then the variable input is labor. We said land is any natural resource that helps us in production of goods and services. And then I also said labor refers to all human effort, both physical and mental, which are used to produce goods and services. So before a producer will produce, the producer is going to combine some amount of land and some quantities of labor to produce the commodity. As I said earlier, land is fixed. It means you can't increase the size of land or you can't decrease the size of land. But labor can be increased or decreased in the short run. So according to the law of diminishing marginal returns to factor, the law states that, you can put it down, the law states that as more and more units of the variable factor, which is labor, are employed on the fixed factor, which is land, the additional unit produced, as I said earlier on, that is the marginal product. The additional unit of the commodity produced will increase initially. It will attain a maximum, and then eventually it will diminish or attain negative values. So it can be illustrated under the short run laws of returns. It simply means that the marginal product will be increasing initially. So we call it increasing returns to factor. And then the marginal product can attain maximum or constant returns to factor. And then the marginal product will eventually diminish or it will decrease and then even attain negative factors or values. So we call it negative returns to factor. Okay, so I'll just write the law on the board for you. So the law states that all other things being equal, as more units of the variable factor, into brackets, labor, are employed on the fixed factor, land, the marginal product, which is the additional unit of the commodity produced, will eventually diminishes. Full stop. Marginal product will eventually diminish simply means it will be increasing, attain maximum, which is constant, it will fall and then attain negative values. So we have some assumptions underlying this law. Some assumptions. Let's look at the assumptions. Assumptions underlying the short run laws of returns. Assumptions underlying the short run laws of returns. Let me explain them to you. The first assumption underlying the short run laws of returns, or the law of diminishing marginal returns, is that 1. There are two main factors of production. This means that we have fixed factor or fixed input and variable factor or variable input. So the fixed factor or input is the land, and then the variable factor or input is labor. Second assumption underlying the law is that all units of the variable inputs are equally efficient. We don't say if you employ 2 units of labor, the first 2 units of labor are efficient more than the subsequent labor employed. No. All units of the variable inputs are equally efficient. And then the last assumption underlying the law is that technology is constant. It means we can't increase or decrease the level of technology. So we are moving on to how to determine the short-run loss of returns to factor. How to determine. So we are going to use a simple schedule to explain the short-run loss of returns. So under the law of diminishing marginal returns, we are much concerned about the additional unit produced, which is the marginal product. We are much concerned about marginal product, not the total product. So let's look at how we can use a schedule to determine the relationship between marginal product and then the other variable inputs. So we are going to use the schedule to explain the short-run loss of returns, increasing returns to factor, constant returns to factor, diminishing returns to factor, and then negative returns to factor. So let's put this schedule down. Land, labor, average product, and then marginal product. So, unit of the variable factor and the fixed factor. Since fixed factor is fixed, so it means it is the same throughout production. So land is 1 unit or 1 acres. 1 acre of land. And then the variable factor. Since labor is a variable input or factor, labor will be changing. So 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and then 11. Product 4, 9, 15, 24, 33, 39, 42, 43, 43, 40, and then 33. And then average product 4, 4, 5, 6, 6, 6, 6, 5, 4, 4, 3. And then marginal product. Since we are much concerned about marginal products, let me change my pen. 4, 5, 6, 9, 9, 6, 3, 1, 0, neg 3, neg 7. Now, in relation to the law of diminishing marginal returns, I said the law is much concerned about the marginal product. So this is the unit of the fixed factor employed, and then the unit of the variable factor employed, labor. As labor is increased from 1 to 11 units, you can see that land is fixed. Land remains unchanged. It is 1 unit throughout production. Now let's come back to marginal product. When the first unit of the variable factor was employed on the fixed quantity of land, marginal product is 4 units. When 1 extra unit of the variable factor, labor, was employed, marginal product increases from 4 units to 5 units. Now let's come to the 5th level of employment and then the 4th level. When 4 units and 5 units of the variable factor, labor, was employed on fixed factor, we can see that the marginal product, the additional unit produced, it remained unchanged. It means it is constant here. When the 4th level of employment and 5th labor was employed, marginal product repeated itself. It was 9 units between the 2 levels of employment. Now, as the firm increased labor from 5 units to 8 units, marginal product started decreasing from 6 units to 0 units. And then, when the firm further increased labor to 11 units, from 8 units to 11 units, the additional unit of the marginal product employed attain negative values. So when the knife labor was employed, marginal product was 0 units, and then when further employment of labor increased from 9 to 11 units, the additional unit of the product produced, which is the marginal product, attained negative values. So according to the law, as you increase the quantities of the variable factor labor, initially the marginal product will be increasing. So we can see that marginal product increased from 4 units to 9 units. So we can call this level of employment as increasing returns. Increasing returns. When labor was increased from 4 units to 5 units, marginal product attained a maximum, which is 9 units. So you can see that marginal product has repeated itself here. So we call this level of employment constant returns. And then when the firm increased the level of employment labor from 5 units to 9 units, you can see that marginal product started decreasing from 6 units to 0 units. We call this level of employment diminishing returns. Diminishing returns. And then when labor was increased from 9 units to 11 units, marginal product started attaining negative values. So we call this level of employment negative returns to factor. So you can see how we can use a schedule to explain the loss of returns to factor. We have increasing returns to factor where the marginal product is increasing, constant returns to factor where the marginal product has attained maximum, diminishing returns to factor where the marginal product has started decreasing, and negative returns to factor where the marginal product is negative. So this morning we have talked about the short run loss of returns to factor. You have to be able to state the law of diminishing marginal returns, and then you have to know the 4 main types of the law, and then how you can use a schedule to determine or explain the loss of returns to factor. When we meet next time, we shall talk about how to use a curve. But if you want further notes and then video, you can go to the internet study mate. You will find the notes I have taught you, and then you can download the notes over there. You can also meet me every Friday from 7 a.m. to 9 a.m. on my internet. Okay. So you can meet me on internet study mate platform so that we can chat or discuss issues that you don't understand. You have some questions there, you can solve them on your own. Thank you. And